Hello and welcome to Winter in Minnesota. Around here, we have a thing called like the hot stove conversation about, what's going to happen in the next season of baseball. I don't know if that's a common baseball term or not, but at least one of the radio stations up here calls it the hot stove talk. And, rather than talking about how the Twins might have an okay season and then get drilled in the playoffs again, I wanted to talk about the new initiative from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency about Clean Cars Minnesota. I don't know a ton about this yet, but I'm hoping to do a series of interviews and discussions to learn more about it. But I wanted to start with my initial impressions and what I know so far. And again, I could be wrong. I'm willing to learn and happy to listen to other viewpoints. But I came across an article from the Star Tribune about a week or so ago by Jennifer Borhaus. Looks like January 11th. I'll have a link to this in the description below. But I just wanted to go through some of the points here and some of the things that came to me as I was reading this. And again, I want to learn more. I want to have a good, healthy discussion on this. To me, just on the face of it, setting, different emissions levels and getting more vehicle choice seems to make a lot of sense. But I know this puts dealerships in a tough spot, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just kind of wanted to go through the article and kind of hit some points as we go through. So for the most part, I'm going to read through this and then stop and give my opinions, but I might not read every little bit just to keep things moving along. The article is entitled, "Defiant Lawmakers, Car Dealers Attack Minnesota Plan to Adopt Zero-Emission Vehicle Mandate." Critics say Minnesotans want big trucks and SUVs, not zero-emission vehicles. Minnesota's push to adopt the Midwest's first zero-emission vehicle mandate to boost supply of electric vehicles for sale has automobile dealers and defiant Senate Republicans on the attack. I'm not trying to be political here. This is what's written. The Minnesota Automobile Dealership Association has sued the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency over its proposed clean car rule. Senate Republicans, meanwhile, have threatened again to try to strip the state regulator of its rulemaking authority with respect to auto emissions. This is my first interjection. I understand that there might be objections to this, but I also don't understand why legislatures create bodies like the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We create these bodies as kind of extensions of the legislature. They're doing other things. They're dealing with everything. So they create these bodies, the Pollution Control Agency, and say, you do the research and you come back and tell us what to do. That's kind of the inherent mission of those agencies. And then when the recommendations come back, if we don't like it, then we say, well, you don't have the authority to make these rules we told you to go and make. So there's probably some nuance in there as far as exactly what their mandate is, but on the face of it, it kind of seems like, we only want you to do your job if we agree with the results of your job, not, something we don't like. So that's another question I'd like to ask someone with more policy information, or, what is exactly the mandate and authority of the Pollution Control Agency as it was set up. To me, it, on the face of it, it seems like, control pollution and make rules and standards to, get that done, just for the overall health of all Minnesotans. The article continues, "Neither move is likely to cut the cord on Minnesota's Clean Cars initiative. The proposed rule requiring automakers to supply Minnesota with more electric vehicles to sell is a keystone of Governor Walz's push to slash greenhouse gas emissions, driving climate change." Again, I don't care who proposed it. this isn't a political thing as far as I'm concerned. If it's a good idea, then we should take a look at it. If it's not a good idea, then we shouldn't. But clearly the agency who's in charge of setting these standards thinks it's a good idea. So we've entrusted them with the mission to look at these things. They came back with their recommendations. Then it talks about the transportation, particular passenger vehicles, is now the state's #1 source of global warming emissions. And Minnesota has not been hitting its emission requirement goals or reduction goals. And I know some people don't believe in climate change, but there's something to be said about having just cleaner air. And that's better. I think everybody in the era of COVID is pretty aware of their lung health or their friends or family who might have asthma or other respiratory diseases. There's a broader concern about that. And reducing pollution, even if you don't think it's helping the climate change situation, it clearly helps with people's respiratory issues. The proposed zero emissions vehicle rule is open for public input until mid-March. An administrative hearing is set for February 22nd and 23rd. So pay attention to those dates if you want to be involved or in the hearing or put your comments in for the public input time frame. Then Senator Bill Ingebretson from Alexandria, he's the chairman of the Environmental and National Resource Finance Committee, says he doesn't think that Minnesota should be adopting standards from California, a state 1,700 miles away. And this kind of thinking has always puzzled me a little bit because we always have this boogeyman of, California, California is trying to make our rules for us. And from my understanding of this, California set its standard, and then our own government would set whatever standards we want to adopt. California is kind of at this point. Do we want to go to that point? Do we want to make steps in that direction? So because California did it first, they're kind of the boogeyman. Everything, we don't want California telling us what to do, but we can decide our own fate here. And it also brings up another thing I've always found really puzzling. My concept of what's best about America is the melting pot of great ideas, wherever they come from. And, whether that's Europe or Asia or, whatever, Canada, Mexico, whoever's got the best idea, I feel like we've always had a way of incorporating those best ideas and maybe refining them, maybe improving on them, or maybe adopting them. But not having the overzealous pride to say, hey, your good idea might work for you, but we don't want any of those good ideas here. And I feel like that's kind of changed to some degree in my lifetime where instead of going, oh, hey, they have a neat thing there, can we bring it here? It's more like, well, we don't want your whatever label you want to put on it, your stuff doesn't belong here. We're already the best. Instead of, I feel like in the past, we had more of an attitude of let's be the best by taking the best ideas and, really pushing them forward, pushing the boundaries. So again, there's this boogeyman of California, telling us what we should do. But other states have done this and done it slightly different than California. Colorado is, I feel, a pretty similar state to Minnesota. And, they kind of made their own version of this and seem to be doing well with it. So I don't think we need to throw ideas out just because they're from California. And so he goes on to say that this is one we vehemently disagree with, and our caucus is willing to stand and fight very hard on this. And again, I find that strange. If it's a good idea and we can do it, responsibly and in our own way, then, we should maybe talk about the details, but fighting over it just because it comes from somewhere else seems crazy. He goes on to say that they tried and failed to negotiate a moratorium with the Walz administration, and they're going to reintroduce some legislation to repeal the MPCA's rulemaking authority. And again, that's where, if you create a body to make rules and then don't like the rules, why did you do that in the first place? You should be, at the beginning of every disaster movie, there's the scientists screaming, no, don't, pour the nuclear stuff on the monster eggs or, whatever. Again, I'm not real steeped in the policy here, but I would like to talk to some people about, what exactly is the mandate for the Pollution Control Agency, and, why shouldn't they have the say on how we control pollution. And then he talks a little bit more about the auto dealer's complaint, and even though he hasn't read it, he likes the idea of slowing things down, because we wouldn't want government to move quickly or efficiently or cost effectively. Anything we can do to slow it down is best, right? I don't mean to be harping on this guy, but these arguments aren't real convincing. Again, my mind could be changed, but on the face of it, from the quotes in this article, I'm not really persuaded that this person is looking for a solution other than just blocking something from a political side he doesn't agree with. I could be wrong. The article continues that the lawsuit filed by the State Automobile Dealers Association in federal court in Minnesota alleges that Minnesota lacks the authority to regulate motor vehicle emissions. Minnesota's move is illegal, it argues, because the administration of President Donald Trump revoked California's waiver under the Clean Air Act to set its own stricter emissions. Now, if I understand correctly, California's standards were allowed under both Republican and Democrat administrations before this. I know that did change under Donald Trump's administration, but as he's out of office in a couple days, and that clearly seems to be a rule that the new administration will change, this seems like an out-of-date argument. The new rule will harm Minnesota auto dealers, the lawsuit says, tie up dealer capital and financing capacity, and push dealers to carry unpopular zero-emission vehicles instead of what consumers want. In Minnesota, those vehicles are overwhelming non-zero-emission vehicles, full-size pickups, and SUVs, according to the lawsuit. And here's where we're kind of in a weird time frame. We have dealers not wanting to have to retrain on a new technology and sell a different type of vehicle. And the argument is people just don't want these. And I always find that a little strange because, let's say, to take it away from vehicles or anything that could be considered political, if you had a new type of M&Ms, let's say you introduce peanut butter M&Ms, one of my absolute favorites, and the M&M company says, we're going to start making these peanut butter M&Ms. And you have grocery stores or convenience stores or whatever in a state saying, well, people don't want those here. We've got our regular M&Ms and we've got peanut M&Ms. We don't want peanut butter M&Ms. Like, no one's asking for that. We don't want it. The manufacturer is saying, no, these are great. People like them. People in other states like them. It's proven different parts of the world, different states. These things are selling like hotcakes. Well, we don't want to have peanut butter M&Ms here because, people aren't asking for them yet. Meanwhile, there are people asking for it, but not maybe in a massive voice. So rather than give people the choice, we keep steering them back to, you just want plain M&Ms, you just want peanut M&Ms. And of course, when these people who want the new brand of M&Ms, when they go to the store, they aren't available. So you walk up to the rack and you're like, oh, I really wanted those new peanut butter M&Ms. I heard they're great. Everybody's talking about them. Well, we don't have them here. So what do? You buy the regulars or the peanut M&Ms. just because that's what's there. So that reinforces, because you bought that reinforces that, oh, people don't want that new kind here. But if you put them on the shelf and could direct people to them, both the people who are already looking for them and people who don't know about them would be able to discover them. So to me, the argument that people don't want them because they aren't here and people don't see them on lots or see them driving around doesn't mean people don't want them. It means they aren't here, which again, this rule, requiring manufacturers to have them here would, kind of solve that problem, bridge that problem. Early in 2020, I went to a hearing about this rulemaking process at the Capitol, the state Capitol. And as I was there, I was listening to the arguments. They didn't really leave enough time for public comment. But as someone was arguing against these rules, their argument for the dealerships was, this will force dealerships to have these cars on the lot, and nobody's going to want them. And so they're going to have to sell them at a loss just to move the inventory. And then his argument to prove that point was that he bought a truck in January of the last year's model. And because it was last year's model, he got a great deal on it. He got this great discount. But what he basically argued there was nobody wants pickup trucks in Minnesota because he was able to get a good deal because this one sat on the lot too long. Clearly, if you've been to Minnesota, you know people like pickup trucks here. So that argument doesn't really hold a lot of water in my mind, especially framed that way. If a vehicle is sitting on the lot for too long and they need to move it, they need to promote it and have knowledgeable sales staff to help move it. That still doesn't guarantee that all vehicles will move, and that's pressure on the manufacturers to make the best EVs they can to really drive sales. And I think there are some great options coming out this year and in the next couple of years. There's going to be some fantastic options. So dealerships are put in another hard spot in a different way that I'll get to in a minute. The article continues. The new zero-emission vehicle mandate would require automakers, not dealers, to supply more of two kinds of passenger vehicles: traditional low-emission vehicles that meet the standards, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and battery electric vehicles. They say hydrogen here, but we aren't going to get hydrogen vehicles here. The rule applies to new passenger vehicles, not older ones, so this wouldn't be for used vehicles or heavy-duty trucks or farm equipment, nothing like that. And it doesn't technically require anything of consumers. At the media briefing on Monday in support of the new rule, Senator Nick Friends of North Mankato appealed to his colleagues across the aisle to work together to support the rule. His feeling is that Clean Cars Minnesota gets the attention of more Minnesotans. The truth will bubble to the surface about the rule, apparently. I'm going to skip a bit here, but Michael Noble, executive director of the nonprofit Fresh Energy, said the state's new rule cements Minnesota's position as the leading state in the Midwest on vehicle electrification and decarbonizing our transportation system. And this gets a little precious, but, we love Minnesota, and it's a great place to be. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be the front runner, but, I feel like, this is just a good idea. Let's not go over the top with it. And now we get into the place where dealerships really are in a tough spot moving forward, and I'll get to that. The dealer's lawsuit came just days after General Motors unveiled its modern new logo and Everybody In marketing campaign to support the Detroit automaker's shift to electric vehicles. GM plans to release 30 new battery-powered vehicles by the end of 2025, including the Hummer EV pickup, due out by the end of the year. In making the announcement, GM issued a statement in which Global Chief Marketing Officer Deborah Wall called the moment an inflection point in history. We believe such a point is upon us for the mass adoption of electric vehicles. So, by the end of 2025, GM plans to release 30 new battery electric vehicles. Ford is starting to pump out the Mustang Mach-E, which by all accounts is a great vehicle. Tesla's already been in this space, obviously. GM has had the Bolt, and they're coming out with the new Cadillac. And interestingly, as that's coming to market soon, they reached out to all their dealers and asked, basically told them, we're either going to buy you out or you have to be all in with us on this electric vehicle revolution. And a lot of people took the buyout. Now, that might be because they're older and were thinking of retiring or selling their dealership anyway. But if GM really is releasing 30 new battery electric vehicles by the end of 2025, and this new rule, my understanding is if it were to be approved this year, this new rule by the Pollution Control Agency wouldn't start until January 2024. That puts it right pretty much in line with what's going to be happening at the dealerships anyway. In my mind, a good rule because it gives guidance on what the state expects, and it gives dealerships a way to say, we need to make the investments in any new technology or education that's needed at the dealership, maybe charging stations or something, which is an investment, that doesn't come out of nowhere. So it could be argued that if the automakers are doing this and the dealerships won't have anything to sell other than EVs, is this rule even necessary? And I would say yes, because it is good to have, that clear target of what the state is expecting. But, that maybe that argument could be made. But just because the manufacturers are making them doesn't mean they're going to appear here. And we've kind of seen that in the last couple of years. Really, there have been a lot of good EVs produced, and they haven't come to the U.S. Europe has way more options, and people are, who have been making EVs have sent all of their inventory to Europe to meet their standards. And so not only are we not getting the newest and best, we aren't even seeing those options on the road in, the entirety of the U.S. And it's not because they aren't there, it's because we haven't made that a requirement of the manufacturers. And one of the big things with EVs is the butts and seats experience of, sitting down, feeling that instant torque of the electric motor. And so having them on lots is important, having them in the state to be seen so people can do rides. But part of the lack of demand for EVs is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in my mind, we're actually losing out on choice and options because we don't have guidance for the manufacturers to follow. Now, obviously, I drive an EV, I talk about them all the time, and so I'm in general in favor of this rule. In my mind, it's 2021. Any new vehicle you're purchasing should be either electric or hybrid at least. There's a lot of great hybrids out there of any kind of vehicle. So there's no reason to not go at least that far. And it looks like we're going to have some great electric trucks and bigger SUVs coming online here too pretty soon. So there's a lot of great options coming regardless of, dealership wants. Now, I can understand they're feeling this pinch, from both sides. The manufacturers saying, we're going to be sending these to you, and the government saying, hey, you have to carry these. And maybe they aren't staffed up. Maybe they don't have a good understanding of how to market or talk about these vehicles, and maybe they need to do some upgrades and things to the dealership site itself. Having people trained up and facilities, able to do what little maintenance there is important, and that might be something they need assistance with as they make that transition. But that doesn't mean the transition shouldn't happen. It just means that's another thing to look at. So maybe instead of rejecting and fighting the rules altogether, maybe they need to be asking for a little help or guidance as this transition takes place. So those are my initial thoughts. To be perfectly honest, I haven't read the full rulemaking proposal. I've got that downloaded, but I wanted to get down my initial thoughts and share those with you. I also want to do a couple interviews with people, whoever I can talk to on either side, to really get a handle on this and what's the best way to move forward. Ask some tough questions, both of the people who are for it and the people who are against it, and kind of see where we are and what the best path moving forward is. Obviously, if you're a Minnesota resident, you want what's best for Minnesota and your fellow Minnesotans. So, working together to try to get there, I think, is the most important thing. So there will be more to this series, and I'll be learning more about it once I, read all the formal rules and everything, and talk to some other people. I hope you'll learn about it too, and if you have any questions or things I should be asking people, feel free to let me know down in the comments. So I know this was a little different, just kind of a chill out, hang out discussion on this, but I appreciate you sticking around for it, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great day.